It's great to see everybody. I have a very minor role in today's activities because once we get these people started, I really will have nothing to do. They'll do all the talking, and that's as it should be. Just, I was chair of the Department of Theater when we made the decision to produce this show, and I'm very glad that we did. It's been a wonderful outcome. Much has been learned by our students, by the creative team, and I think the show will just continue to move forward and forward and forward, and if Purdue Theater could be a part of that, then I'm very proud of that. I'll let each person introduce themselves, and then I have a starting question for them, and then they're off and running, and if I can, I'll try to sort of shape the conversation, but again, who knows if I'll even be allowed to do that. But they did say interrupt them along the way and ask questions, so please don't hesitate to ask questions.
And one other thing, there's 8 seats open right here, and we can't even see you there. And we just, one of the things about being in the diners is
if you can't
if
see,
any of you could come over here and fill up this spot, we so appreciate it.
but don't fall off the edge.
Don't fall off the edge. And hopefully you'll enjoy us so much better from here, seeing our front side as opposed to, I know the back of my head is.
Watch your step, watch your step.
Watch your
Hold
step right
here.
here.
All right, better?
Oh, perfect. Linda, one more seat over here.
So Rick, why don't you start?
I'm Rick Thomas. I'm a professor of visual and performing arts. I've had a long career as a composer and sound designer for theater. Van Phillips was my mentor, brought me to Purdue in 1976. He's the person who had the vision that sound would actually become something in the theater. And I was more than happy to try to help make it happen a little bit along the way.
And internationally he has. So
Well, once or twice. But at any rate, part of my lifelong journey has been figuring out what is the role of music in theater. And so for the last 25 years, I would say, I have been developing works on my own that explore this gray area I call in between music and theater, concert and play, and of which this particular exploration, which has been going on for some time, is a part of. And this is my colleague in crime, depending on how you look at it, Carrie Newcomer, the world famous Carrie Newcomer.
Newcomer, and I'm a songwriter and performer. I actually got my start right here at Purdue, and Rick and I have been collaborating in different kinds of ways for 30 years. But you know, I have to say this is one of my favorite collaborations ever, and it's been such a delight to see this play come to life and the characters so beautifully come to life here with this production. Geraldine, who is our Miranda. Hi, I am Geraldine. I'm one of the MFA actors here. I play Miranda in the show, and this is my terminal project, so this is how I get my master's. I have a BA in musical theater, and I come from San Diego, which is known with La Jolla Playhouse and Old Globe for a lot of new works, but this was my first new work to be a part of. It's been a very fun journey.
And I just want to mention one other person who I asked if he would like to join us up here, and he said that's the last thing in the world I would like to do. Al Chiskin, who plays Brian. Al and I did his occupation, another new work that was premiered at Purdue 15 years ago, Al, something like that.
Yeah.
And Al has been active in civic theater here for a long, long time.
So
We are all one big family, aren't we?
We are. So we'll start the conversation. I know you've been asked a lot of questions about the play, or how you met, or how you created the play, and so on and so on. I'm going to start by asking you a very simple question, which is the question of why. Why this play? Why this music? Why this time? Why this need? Why Betty's Diamond?
2 words, easy money.
She hoots and
Well, to answer that question, we just have to go back to the beginning. I already sort of gave you my, take on what I'm interested in exploring, in theater. And quite frankly, the areas I'm interested in exploring don't exist in the modern theater. So if you look at my body of work of original productions, this is kind of like that, because for those of you who have seen it already, and those of you who will see it, first thing you realize, this isn't traditional musical theater. We've been advised by a lot of people not to call it a musical. Why? Because it doesn't resemble a Broadway musical. But we think it's a musical, has as many songs as a Broadway musical, Feels like a musical to us, it's just different. But at any rate, maybe you could talk about, why in the world did you ever agree to do this?
He called me up and, no.
Told her easy money.
Well, kind of going back to the beginning of Betty's Diner. Betty's Diner was first a short story that I wrote because everywhere I go, people tell me stories. People are very generous with me and often tell me really amazing stories. And I was carrying these stories around with me, and I wanted to honor them in a certain kind of way without telling their exact story, but to honor the human story. So I wrote a short story which became the song Betty's Diner. After that, I thought the diner people were done with me, but they had more to say. And the diner people kept speaking, and I wrote a collection of songs from the perspective of different characters in Betty's Diner, and wrote a lot of short stories and background for them. Rick, I'm always sending new stuff to Rick. He gets an MP3 in the mail, like, this is a new one, And he said, this is a theatrical production. This is a play. And it really meant that would stretch my edges. I mean, in all kinds of interesting new ways, because I've never worked in that kind of way. I've created characters, I've created songs, I do concerts, I've also done spoken word music events, but never a theatrical production like this. So I knew it was going to really stretch all my creative edges. And we talk a lot about, both of us are very restless creatively, that if I'm not stretching my creative edges, I get kind of bored with myself pretty quick, and a little crabby. So, so I have to kind of be always learning something, pushing that creative edge in some way. Another, just briefly, I'm talking too much, but in terms of now, one of the ideas, and I think undercurrents of Betty's Diner, is this idea that we're not so separate as the world would say that we are. We're living in a very divisive time in that, on a human level, we're more connected, on those important things, those important human things, that we're still so connected, and that there's something honorable and beautiful about our daily work and experience. So that's why now for this particular message.
That's a good answer.
In terms of that, let me just say one more thing about that, about Carrie and I. When Carrie and I work, we have been coffee clutching for years, for like 30 years. So there's oftentimes we will sit and chat about the meaning of life for 2-3 hours before we even get to working on Betty's Diner, or whatever project we have to be working on at the time. So there is a camaraderie of spirit that we have that you really find embodied in Carrie's work in a very profound way, if you know and follows Carrie's work. And so, a lot of this musical grows out of that worldview that Carrie has, and that we have sat and talked and argued and debated and, commiserated on for 30 years. So I didn't want to don't let that.
And so for you, I'll get you next. So for you, Gerald, as far as, yes, you auditioned for and were assigned this role. But then you have to make it personal.
Yes.
And so for you, why this role? Why Miranda?
Well, like you said, I was assigned it, but it's been a joy to work on. Part of the MFA terminal work is we do a preliminary presentation of research and contextual and character analysis to even get approved to have this as my terminal role. I need to prove that I've done the research worthy of doing this as my role. So I looked into Carrie's work and Rick's work, and I also looked into what owning a diner really means, the history of diners, the logistics and financial responsibilities an owner would have, especially looking and using the script as my guide on what aspects do I need to research. So I think that brought a lot of richness and depth to my process before I even began. We are taught the Meisner technique in the graduate acting class, and they talk about the idea of a character idea. So something you think like the character is. And to me, Miranda is a lost puzzle piece. She knows she fits somewhere and can't quite figure it out until, and we've all been there in a puzzle, and we can't find where this one piece is supposed to go until you put it down. And of course, it was always supposed to be there. So even the physical tension journey of where does this piece go? And then the release of realizing where you're supposed to be, that really drove my journey. And then really what's been an absolute joy is performing and meeting Carrie's fans and just getting that feeling of community. Even in our cast and crew became a family, and even just feeling that family extension out into the audience every night. It's been really beautiful.
Rose, you had a
Yes,
question.
I want to begin by commending you for not doing a Broadway musical. That is number one. Your music is so accessible to one's mind, ears, and body. And it is great to hear acoustic music. I want to tell you, Carrie, that I first heard about you in 1985 when I was out of the country doing research, and then I came back. And my teenage daughters said to me, "Hey, Mom, there's something you have to hear." And they took me over to the Knickerbocker to hear Stone Soup. Okay? I want you to comment on folk music, acoustic folk music. How do you stay true to that?
Well, I think it comes down to really following what you love, what your heart really calls you to. I love music, I love poetry, I love the combination of the two. I had someone really, a wonderful writer tell me once, he had a mentor, he was doing theater and music, and he was doing the singer-songwriter thing, and he was trying to make a go of it for his life, and his mentor told him, you don't want to be the best singer-songwriter. That's not what you want. And he said, really? So what do I want? And his mentor said, this particular artist's name is Bill Harley. And he said, you want to be the only Bill Harley. That's what you want. You want to perfect your art, study your art, to get as good as you can be with your art, but then be completely true to who you are and what you bring to the art form. I love something about folk music in that it's still music that we sing together. There's very few places that we sing together in community still. Maybe church, maybe this national anthem at a game. Lollapalooza. But when people sing together, something shifts in a room.
I want you to know that we still have Acoustic Blend on WDAA. And we have a Bluegrass Connection program for 2 hours.
Hooray.
Sophia, you had a question.
Yeah, I know that in any production, particularly a new one, there are going to be lots of changes from conception to fruition. And I'm just curious for each of you, if you could give us an example of something you started with that along the way you said, or it just morphed into something. Now, I've seen the show, and I know you don't want to give things away for those who haven't, but can you just talk about that creative process from here's our show to, oh, we better change that, and now here's our show.
We could talk about the minutia of the thousands and thousands of changes we've made over the last 10 years. We're about to release version 4.0. There's been a version 1, 2, and 3. Version 3 is up to version 3.6, and each one of those, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, is massive enough that we had to give it another number, but it wasn't like the big revision. So there are so many thousands of revisions that have happened over 10 years that it would be
Right,
you
but
know,
like, is there anything
small.
big?
But I'll tell you, probably the biggest one for me, and maybe Carrie will have a different one. When we started this thing, we were going to do a little play up at the college. And Carrie was going to sing, and we were going to do like a workshop. And it was going to be like a Spoon River anthology where, she wrote these songs, right? We always had this idea that, from the very beginning though, that we were going to treat it like a Shakespearean comedy. That all of these characters' stories would interweave through some central journey through the diner. And of course, that's been the hardest thing to make happen, is it's a very, very complex story of a lot of individual journeys, and to try to make them all fit together in a way that feels seamless and doesn't feel tacked together, and it's not a jukebox musical and all that sort of stuff, has taken an incredible amount of time, a lot of readings, a lot of feedback from producers and directors and playwrights that we've met and we know all over the country. But when we started out, it was going to be pretty darn simple in its own way. And we got, and this is in version 1, and we got quite a ways through it and got something we were happy with. And we invited a group of professional actors from Indianapolis to come up to our house one night on a Friday evening, and we did the very first reading. And we did that reading, and we went back to the drawing table, and it probably wasn't immediate, but somewhere along that time, we started going, you know what, these characters, they have to sing their own story. And of course, because I'm in theater and have been involved with, theater my whole life, I knew what that meant, and it's not good.
Unless it's Geraldine.
No, I don't mean it in that kind of not good way. I mean, what's not good about it is we're talking about going from a play and a workshop that you could do anywhere with no money to doing a musical in which you have to hire a musical director, a band. It gets very expensive, and nobody's going to want to do it. And so it was a gigantic leap of faith, and I'm still not sure to this day how much I clearly warned Carrie of what she was getting herself into. Because, having known what she knows now, she knew then, would she still go on the journey? I don't even ask her that question. I don't want to know the answer to that. But we made that decision that we were going to have the characters sing their own songs and tell their own stories. And that was a gigantic leap forward and a gigantic change in what this musical was going to be about.
Thank you.
Bang.
You talked about this being more than just a few actors and a few easy things. I want to expand on that because the Malletts are here. And I look at this space and I remember that we as a faculty basically designed this space as what did we really want, because we've been bouncing around from found space around the university, only to have that room taken over by engineering or pharmacy or something, and we'd find another. We said if we were really going to do one, we'd do what do we want? And this was designed as a student workshop. What was the thinking behind putting a musical in this theater versus the other theater?
Before he answers, let me tell you that the producer of Purdue Theater would have preferred that it was at the big
I
theater.
understand the seats, I
At the
understand,
time, I can tell you, he would have very much liked it to be there. Because, and I know now, we could have sold out over in the Hanson and would have brought in a lot more ticket sales. But it was the wish, and I think it was the right choice of the team, that it be in a more intimate setting. And but we had that discussion. We definitely
If we showed you all the emails, we would be revealing too much. That went back and forth between Joel and me and Carrie about, and Rich Rand was involved in the project at the time, in terms of where the space wanted to be. But from the very beginning, and fundamentally about this musical is a play about family. And it's not just a play about the fictitious family that you see on stage. The play is about the family that you create in the process of making a play. Geraldine, not Miranda, and all of the actors, the designers, the technicians were all one family. But it's also a play about the family of the audience. And so from the very beginning, we wanted a space in which the audience, as much as we possibly could, felt like they were patrons in the diner and part of our theater family. And we want to be able to go back and forth between those two, realities and play with that going back and forth between those two realities. So that at the end of the play, you feel really comfortable, like you're part of us, and not you've been shut out and looking through the traditional fourth wall for the entire show, and suddenly we're breaking down the fourth wall and going, oh, here you are. To do that in the Hanson Theater would never ever work, because it's by definition, looking through a fourth wall. And in future productions, everybody says to us, can't wait to see you on Broadway. I go, well, you're going to have to, because we will never be on Broadway. Broadway theater is too large to create this sense of family. If we got incredibly lucky off-Broadway, there are places off-Broadway where you can have this, you can create this kind of environment. And every night, work to create this sense of family.
And I think that's a little bit, going back to the folk sensibility of this, I mean, it's always been a current in the songs, in the music, and the characters. This, what is community? Where do we find it? Where do we find and create family? That this idea of people participating and being part of the diner, quite literally. Your feet are on the sidewalk.
I watch them scoot every time I go on the sidewalk.
and that's great, in that people hopefully, our hope is that people would feel when they left, I've been part of this.
Well, and to touch on that a little too, from a musical theater nerd status, the most commercially successful close thing to a folk musical has been Once on Broadway, which is coming to Purdue in the spring. Check it out, it's awesome. But they struggled with from like a critiquing aspect, the idea of the intimacy of a folk style musical required they create the intimacy in a large proscenium setting. So in that show, the entire cast is on the audience as the musicians. In the pre-show and intermission, often the bar on stage becomes a working bar and the audience is invited on. So in that way, they create that community feeling. But even, I saw it on Broadway, in a smaller Broadway house, but it was still huge. And then I saw it on tour in San Diego, and I was in the back balcony, and the intimacy is not as present, and that's partially folk instruments and how they need to be amplified. And the level of intimacy, I agree with them. I think it really works for this space. Having done smaller musicals in similar spaces, that's that intimacy level you can't really recreate as tangibly in a large proscenium setting.
And one other comment about where does this come from. Many of you have seen Carrie Newcomer in concert. So you know that when you go to a Carrie Newcomer concert, there is that same feeling of family. There's that same feeling of somehow you all feel like you know her personally. And so from the very beginning, there was never any doubt that in this exploration of the gray area between concert and play, that we wanted to create that same feeling with an audience. And getting back to your original point, without a space like this, we could not do this. And this space has worked marvelously to do that. So thank you.
We have time for one more question. Carole, you have a question?
I'm going to preface something first. I very sheepishly say that we have not been able to see your production. We've only been on campus 4 times in 7 days for other things. But I'm a retired school administrator in student services personnel. And I also, Gordon and I are going on 88 years old. And we have lived through the diner era, and we are still in the diner era, because we are always looking for a great place to have our breakfast and brunch. And we know practically all of the diners and the area for breakfast and brunch in the upper half of Indianapolis. So we can probably relate to this play very well. But also as an administrator of kids for 34 years, teenagers and junior college students, we are in a time where things are very unsettled. And families and kids are groping for some sense of knowledge and security besides going into their texting or the computers or a high-tech era. So seeing this musical gives a great sense of value and ethics to the time of the diner era. And you are reaching out to families, and we compliment you on this, that are not high-tech, robotic, what's going to be on the TV tomorrow, or whatever. You are reaching out and showing there are real people who conversed, who got together, who chit-chatted, and we don't have to sit with our iPhones and all this kind of stuff. And I compliment you on your choice, and I really would like to get here to see the Betty's Diner. But we can relate to what you're trying to portray.
Well, one of the things I loved about this production, our character ages range from a 5-year-old to our older couple who are in their 90s, and folks who are in their 60s, 50s, 40s, 20s. It's a very wide age range.
Yeah.
And they all find their place in the diner and have their have their purpose there in the diner as well, and value and appreciation. There's appreciation for all the characters wherever they're at in their life story.
And also how to keep this small family feeling community relevant in a technological age. So you've got the kids on their cell phones. You've got them trying to switch it to more vegan sustainable, which in my research, that is how a lot of restaurants are switching to keep up, is going more sustainable, local, everything, because that is the trend that is being demanded. And so it is fun to see the old versus new come together through the show as well. And we're like,
And young people really grasp knowledge about what went on in Grandma and Grandpa and Great-Grandma's age. They really do. They like to know.
But sometimes they haven't had the experience of family
That's right. They haven't.
that this is all about.
So folks,
It's fun to just watch young people, because they cry just as much as the older people in the show. And they love Alice and Roy.
They do.
They just love Alice and Roy.
One of my favorite blocked moments, she set up, there's a little love song that happens, and then we have the young lovers sitting at this table, and we have our older lovers sitting at this table, and they sing the song, and at the end of that song, they're singing together. And it's one of my favorite images.
But what we have found when we breakfast bar hop is that we have met such wonderful people, and the people who work for the diner are just so kind and hospitable and friendly.
I got my first job at a family-run diner.
And we go to these diners, if you will, just because of the people. I mean, the food is good too, but we go because of the people.
I've worked an all-night diner. I'm an artist. I have waitresses.
Oh, I did it too. So we all did it.
I'm going to take this pause. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to Harry for hosting, and thank you to Rick and to Carrie and to Geraldine. And please if you are not a regular patron of Purdue Theater, we'd like to invite you to be. There's plenty of people here that are. They can tell you the merits of that. And so thank you very much. And the next first Wednesday is scheduled for?
November the 4th, and that's going to feature our music faculty, and we have a guest composer that's going to be there. And I really think, can we give another round of applause to our Eddie Steiner team? You're just going to love it. You're going to enjoy the music. It's
I don't
tremendous.
think it's just for this theater. I think you're playing, that's hope.
That's what they hope.
Are you going to license? I mean, is it going to be available?
The signs are all very, very, very positive.
Signs pointed yes.
Well, thank you all for coming, and come back and see us in November. Thank you.